Good afternoon. My name is Bill Panos, and I'm the Director of the North Dakota Department of Transportation. Today, we're going to have a bit of a town hall on Accelerate ND, the governor's proposal to invest in North Dakota with federal dollars that have come to North Dakota to help us with dealing on the back end of the pandemic. Now, I won't cover all of Accelerate ND's proposal, and there are many. We'll leave a link in the chat to the Accelerate ND presentation that the governor had made with regards, I think last week, with regards to Accelerate ND. Today, we'll have a link there as well for a one-page handout, which gives you additional information about all of the ways that Accelerate ND invests in North Dakota, invests in our people, invests in our places, and invests in our businesses and across the state and our communities across the state. So please go to those to get more information. Today, as the director of the North Dakota Department of Transportation, I'm going to be focused on transportation infrastructure that is contained within the Accelerate ND proposal. First, a bit of gratitude. Many of you are part of our transportation family. There are many counties on this call, cities, townships. There are many legislators on this call, our general contractors, consultants, stakeholders throughout the state of North Dakota. I am so grateful to be associated with North Dakota and this incredible NDDOT agency and to work with all of you. We are together focused on our economy, our mobility, and the safety of our citizens. And I can't think of anything more important than that. Thank you. Thank you for all that you do each and every day for the citizens of North Dakota. So the first thing that I wanted to do was talk about the COVID relief funding, again, from a transportation point of view, and to describe what got us here. We organize, at least in our world, the funding that has come to the state of North Dakota for COVID relief into three tranches. Tranche 1, or the CARES Act, was developed in March of 2020. And this money primarily focused on our response to COVID, helped us with personal protective equipment, helped us with testing, helped us with responding to the COVID emergency in a way that assured and that moved forward the health of the public and in that period of time. But it also added money from the federal government to states to help them continue to move people through the transit agencies, through our public transit systems across the country, and to keep our airports open and operating during this very difficult time. Now, remember, Tranche 1 was back in March of 2020. In the transportation space here in North Dakota, about $100 million that was received and consumed by not only all of the state agencies and services, but also local government agencies and services that were providing public transit, airports, and COVID response. This allowed us, by the way, at NDDOT to keep our motor vehicle and driver's license offices open and functioning during this period of time. Tranche 2 really came in December of 2020, at the end of the last administration, federal administration, and we call it year-end COVID relief, or Tranche 2. And in that time, there was a significant effort on the part of the departments of transportation around the country to request that some of this money become eligible for roads and bridges and other things that help with mobility and safety throughout our great country and our state. And we were successful. So in that year-end COVID relief money in December of 2020, it did include transit, it did include aeronautics and airports, but it also in the transportation space, but it also included highways and bridge funding as well. And we worked with our county and city and local government entities to get this money out to them as quickly as we could. And we continue to spend through that money as of most recently projects that we just issued in the last few months. So we've been working hard with our partners around the state to get that money out, to create jobs, and to improve the infrastructure in North Dakota. Now, Tranche 3, or the Rescue Act money, is the money that is being discussed now. There is a special legislative session, which has in a way started. We've been having meetings as of today, and we'll continue to have meetings, interim meetings, if you will, to prepare for the special session, which will come at the beginning of November, according to the current sort of schedule that's been laid out. Now, there'll be a number of proposals that are discussed by the legislature during this legislative session. And I wanted to mention that there will be two things going on in this legislative session. Of course, redistricting will go on, and then the consideration of the allocation of some of this Tranche 3 or Rescue Act money. Now, it probably is important to mention that the Rescue Act money from the federal government came in. It's a discretionary fund, and it came in two different forms. The first part of it was actually pre-programmed and went to various agencies throughout the state, some in the education area, some in the human services area, and there are others, health department, et cetera, workforce. And then some of it was unallocated. And it really is that unallocated money, about a little over $1 billion or so, that is the subject of Accelerate ND. Now, since I guess it was June of last year, we have been working with our other fellow cabinet agencies, the governor's office, the legislature, our counties, our cities, our stakeholders around the state to come up with the best, most cost-effective proposals possible. We went far and wide looking for ideas to build the Accelerate ND proposal. Some $4 or $5 billion worth of proposals were considered, but only the best of the best made it all the way through to be part of the proposal that the governor finally submitted last week to the legislature for their consideration. These are the best in terms of the return on investment. These are the best in terms of needed infrastructure in our communities. These are the best investments that we have worked on with all of our stakeholders throughout the state of North Dakota. And again, I won't speak about all of the Accelerate ND proposal. You can go to the links that are in the chat, or to the governor's website, and you can see more about Accelerate ND. I will speak just about the transportation proposals today. And those are about $355 million. Many of those are related to the last legislative session, and I will talk about that in just a bit. So I had mentioned before that in Accelerate ND, the Department of Transportation, the total recommendation is around $355 million. And this has two parts to it. The first is highway, road, and bridge repairs and construction. And the second is township road repairs. Let me take these one at a time. The highway, road, and bridge repairs portion is about $332 million of the request. Now, this includes, the bulk of it actually, is $317 million that was appropriated from the last legislative session in House Bill 1395, but not authorized. And what that means is that the appropriation was put into place, but there wasn't any dollars that were placed with it. And in this special session, in this part of the Accelerate ND proposal, we are asking the legislature to consider authorizing the dollars to match that appropriation that they passed in the last legislative session. The next part of that $332 million proposal is new, and it's a $15 million appropriation and authorization for a secondary access road for emergencies near Medora. As you know, there have been many fires out in that area, And we have a lot of people concentrating in Medora, particularly around the amphitheater. And it is to provide greater emergency access and a secondary access to that area. What's great about our proposals, and again, about our team here at the North Dakota Department of Transportation, is that all of our projects are ready. We're ready for bid no later than spring of 2022. And in some cases, we can execute these projects to bid within 60 days. That's because we keep a shelf-ready pool of projects that we have worked on, designed, and are ready for bid. This means that jobs can be created quickly. This means that projects can be deployed quickly, that we can address our supply chain issues. As you know, across our great country, and frankly, the world, demand has outstripped supply, and we have supply chain issues. North Dakota needs to get to the front of that line. And by us being in a position for the legislature and the state government to bid these projects quickly, we can get to the front of the line. We want to thank the state legislature for their great support of all of the transportation projects and programs and funding that they provided in the last legislative session. They just did a great job. And I'm glad we're now talking about finishing all of that up in this Accelerate ND proposal. The last thing to mention here is that all of these projects address critical and emergency road needs in all of our communities around the states, our cities, our counties, our highway systems, obviously our state and federal systems, and our townships as well, which will lead me to the next part of the Accelerate ND recommendation. But before we did that, I wanted to talk in a little bit more detail about the kind of projects that the $355 million Accelerate ND proposal will fund. The types of projects that will fund, and we're going to focus specifically on the portion of the projects that are the $317 million appropriation that was approved last legislative session from HB 1390, House Bill 1395. Now, the types of projects that were in that and that are in this proposal are four-laning US Highway 85 from Watford City to Long X. Highway 85 has needed four-laning for a number of years, not just to move our economy and freight through that corridor, but for safety. For many of our North Dakota citizens, it is a difficult road to travel on, particularly at night, particularly in the winter. And this will improve the conditions there and improve safety all along that corridor. So the first part of this proposal is to four-lane US Highway 85 from Watford City to the Long X Bridge. As many of you know, we've had a great project and a great partnership with the county governments, the city governments, and our contractors and consultants at building and demolishing and then building the Long X Bridge. It's a remarkable engineering achievement, and this continues that project by four-laning US Highway 85 from Watford City to the Long X Bridge. This proposal also helps us with interstate safety improvements, cable median barriers on all of I-29 and I-94. We have found in our Vision Zero program that many of our fatalities, crashes and then fatalities, are because people will transition from one side of these major highways or interstates to the other. A cable median barrier allows them to come in contact with something, a cable in the median, that will allow them to not cross over and into oncoming traffic. These are inexpensive, quick to fix, and don't create more damage if somebody hits them. In fact, it absorbs a lot of the energy from those kinds of crashes. These have proven to be very, very useful to us across the state, and in this proposal, we'll be installing more of them throughout our great state. The proposal also includes improvement of our rest areas and then new rest areas in a couple of locations. The rest areas had proven during the COVID response to be extremely important for people and for freight that was moving across our country. And we immediately took steps to clean those areas much more frequently, I think every hour or so, 24 hours a day during the COVID pandemic. And this improves many of those rest areas so they can accommodate more people. They can be cleaned easier. They're more lit. They're safer. People feel better using them. People can have lunches there, that kind of thing. And they become an important part of mobility and safety in our state system. Another thing that is included in this proposal is adding smart corridor technology. We've talked before, I think, in many different venues or different forums about the need to improve our ability to make traveling on our road system safer. And smart corridor technology allows us to know more and drivers to know more about the conditions that they're facing immediately in front of them and along their journey, and gives them real-time information about hazards, about accidents, about construction, and other kinds of things that are really, really important for them to know to make the right decisions as they travel through our great state. This whole project rehabilitates nearly 200 miles of North Dakota roads, one of the largest investments in our transportation infrastructure and our economy in our state's history. I wanted to show you a map of where some of these improvements are going on. And it looks, it's a little hard to read because the map is so large, but you can see in the legend that the appropriation that the legislature had passed in the last legislative session with House Bill 1395, it includes about $317 million of appropriation, and that it touches a number of different sort of transportation needs in our state. The 10-year infrastructure plan, we developed probably, I want to say now it's 18 months ago, a comprehensive look at our state's transportation infrastructure. And we looked at what it would take to maintain the current infrastructure so that it achieves its design life. In other words, we build something to last for 20 years, or we build something to last for 30 years, or we build something to last for 50 years. What does it take to invest in that infrastructure so that it hits those marks, so that it realizes its design life? And for us in North Dakota, we're a bit behind on bridges, and we're a bit behind on some of our highways and roads. And we call this report our 10-year infrastructure plan. This will begin to invest and make the first down payment towards our 10-year infrastructure plan of $167 million, and begin the process of modernizing, improving, repairing our bridges, repairing our roads so that they can realize their intended design life. This is not about creating brand new highways. This is not about creating new bridges all over the state or anything like that. This is simply about maintaining what we already have and what we've already invested in so that it can realize its design life. Here we also have some interstate reconstruction projects that the federal government and some of the communities in the state would like us to undertake. Most of that is west of Fargo and in the West Fargo area, and then between Fargo and Grand Forks, where we've seen some of our greatest population increases and, frankly, mobility challenges that we've had. You can see on Highway I-29, Interstate 29 and Interstate 94, the cable median guardrail, which will be installed during along those entire lengths. You can see the rest areas and visitor centers. Under this proposal, we would also add a couple of visitor centers, rest areas south of Fargo along I-29. They were removed a number of years ago, and we need additional rest areas, and we've heard from communities that they would like additional rest areas down in that part of the state. Excuse me. And then an urban project, a very large one up in the Williston area, to help them with a particular intersection that is downtown, and that'll help them with their economic development and the creation of a new sort of investment corridor in that area and more. I mean, there's many more projects. These are simply the additional projects that we'll be able to deploy in addition to the normal projects that we deploy throughout every year and that impact every community, and more's coming. You also see here that's not really listed is our smart corridor technology along I-29, our wetland development, which I want to talk about for a second. As you know, across many of you know, across the state, when we impact a wetland or another environmentally sensitive area, oftentimes we have to mitigate those impacts. And when the conditions are right, when the project is of a certain nature, we're able to mitigate those through what we call land banking. And for years and years, the state has maintained some of the largest and most effective and inexpensive land banks that in our history. And those are running out. And we need to establish new land banks in different parts of the state so that our not only our state projects, state infrastructure projects, but county infrastructure projects and local government, township and city infrastructure projects have an opportunity to mitigate in a cost-effective manner. The Jersey barrier issue it seems very specific, but in fact, Jersey barriers are an important safety tools. These are the concrete barriers that you'll see along off-ramps and on-ramps and things like that and other places. We have new standards for those, and so this is to replace and upgrade our Jersey barriers throughout our state. And I wanted to mention one more thing about US 85 project. Now, in addition to improving or four-laning the Highway 85 from Watford City to the Long X Bridge, we also in this proposal are dollars for us to improve, begin the process of doing pre-construction and design and utility work, relocation work, and some other work from Long X all the way down to Highway 200, North Dakota 200. And so this continues this important project of Highway 85 and the improvements and safety improvements along Highway 85 through this particular investment and appropriation that came from the last legislative session, where we got the appropriation, but we did not get the authorization or the authority. And here in this particular part of Accelerate Indy, we are just asking the legislature to consider putting the dollars into this appropriation so that we can go out and create these jobs and improve these areas of our state and invest in our infrastructure. Okay. I wanted to mention a couple of other, get into a little more detail about the projects. I didn't want to get too far down in this, but I mentioned the four laning from US 85 to Watford City, from Watford City to the Long X Bridge. The next design segment of US 85, from the Long X Bridge to North Dakota 200. We have on this list as well, widening and pavement overlay projects on North Dakota 14, North Dakota 17, North Dakota 25, 31, 32, 46, 49, an amazing list of projects all over the state that will help improve freight movement and help make safer our roads and bridges safer for the traveling public. I mentioned the Jersey barriers for us to under this proposal to construct new barriers to meet the new requirements and replace outdated ones. I already mentioned the high tension cable median guardrail. There is, I mentioned just briefly, rehabilitating a segment of I-94 from West Fargo to the Horace interchange. This is really important not only for that part of the state, but for some of the flood control work that's going on in that part of the state now. Rehabilitate a segment of I-29 from Kelso to North Dakota 200, the junction with North Dakota 200. The intersection I mentioned in downtown Williston, again, I mentioned the modernizing of rest areas across the state, new rest areas south of Fargo, a couple of them, the smart corridor technology along I-25, and then the wetland bank mitigation banks that are important. I want to spend a little bit more time on these last two bullets. I wanted to mention that the Smart Corridor technology is an important part of something we call our Transportation Management Center, or TMC. And in conjunction with North Dakota State University and the Upper Great Plains Transportation Institute, we are beginning the process. I think we're one of the last states, if not the last state in the United States, to have a statewide transportation management center. And what this does is this connects vehicles to the infrastructure and the infrastructure to the vehicles, and allows the vehicles and the traveling public to get real-time information about the conditions on the road where they're at and in front of them. So you can imagine being able to know about accidents right as they occur, some 20 miles ahead of you in a snowstorm, and being able to avoid that area. Or if you're even closer, within 5 miles, and you cannot see it, and so that we avoid multiple car pileups and things like that. The TMC allows us to do that. And this is not future technology. This is technology that exists today in other states that we want to deploy here in North Dakota to save lives. And so the Smart Corridor technology along 25 is a huge step. I-29 is a huge step in that direction. And this proposal will allow us to get going on that. By the way, the federal government is keenly interested and ready to provide additional dollars, not only through these funds, these federal COVID funds, but additional federal funds to bring forward to help us with future phases of this. So this is an important project for us and them. I had mentioned the develop a wetland mitigation bank for projects. We have heard from counties across the state that is extremely expensive, if not unavailable, for them to get the kinds of wetland mitigation credits that they need to move their infrastructure projects forward. And this could be a transportation project or a water project or any kind of development project. And if they cannot utilize a inexpensive state land bank to move their infrastructure projects forward, again, they have to go to the outside market. And these are extremely expensive propositions for them. This will create an opportunity by us developing new mitigation banks, land banks. This will create an opportunity for their dollars, their very precious dollars, to go further as they invest in infrastructure, whether that be water infrastructure or airport infrastructure or transportation infrastructure or wastewater infrastructure throughout our great state. Okay. I wanted to move on to the second part of the Accelerate ND proposal, which is related to our great townships. In this proposal of $355 million, $23 million of it is related to township road repairs. Now, in the last legislative session, I had mentioned earlier that the legislature just did a fantastic job of listening not only to the needs of the cities and the counties and the state government, but the needs of townships as well. And they had allocated to the North Dakota Department of Transportation some $750,000 for us to go out and do emergency repairs that were critically needed in these townships. And when we sent the request out for projects for the $750,000 in emergency repairs, $13 million worth of project requests came in from townships. This part of Accelerate ND takes care of that demand and allows us to bring the kind of dollars and projects to the townships that they are desperately needing right now. And so that's the first part of it. The second is that it provides $10 million for townships, again, of these federal dollars to help us match the $10 million of state money that has already been appropriated by the legislature in the last legislative session. So again, this is an example of something that we are just finishing up from the last legislative session to help townships. I wanted to take a moment here to talk a bit about townships, and then I want to talk a little bit more about the federal money and why this federal-state partnership is so important. But first, townships. Our townships are amazing. They are numerous, and for the first time in the last legislative session, the state legislature gave us permission to work with them directly at help improving their roads and their bridges. Before the last legislative session, we actually could not help them. There were some statutes in place that have been changed that did not allow us to help them, and now we can. Townships are great. 6 by 6 mile section of land. 11 states have township governments, and there are about 1,360 organized townships in the state of North Dakota. The townships are important because they serve our rural citizens and rural communities. Most of our agricultural commodities, once they come off the field, go right onto a township road. And so this is so important to our agricultural economy, our ranching economy, and so important to those farmers and ranchers and their families that live in these great places around our state. As I mentioned before, the state legislature under Senate Bill 2012 had provided us about $750,000 for emergency repairs, and we've received over $13 million in requests. So this federal money will help us help townships. Let me talk for a moment about the federal dollars that come into the state of North Dakota. And it's like this all over the country. In North Dakota, there are two kinds of federal money that come into the transportation space. The first is monies that are called formula monies. And formula monies are basically tax reallocation, federal tax reallocation. And it comes to us in a complicated way through a complex formula that has been negotiated with states and the US Congress over years and years. Here in North Dakota, because of our population, our small population and large land size, we enjoy a match ratio of about 80-20. What that means is that for every $2 the state government puts in, the federal government, through the formula, will put in 8. This has allowed us to do a lot of work, but is only part, a lot of transportation infrastructure improvements and transportation work, but it's only part of the federal government funding. The other half of the formula is, the other half of the federal funding is called discretionary money. And this is everything that is not formula. This is grants, COVID money, all of these kinds of dollars that come in directly for bridges or for cities or counties. These all come in the form of grants. This federal discretionary money is really the focus and includes, by the way, these COVID dollars. And so this is the focus for us, to take these federal COVID dollars, discretionary money, grant money, and invest it in North Dakota townships, in North Dakota cities, counties, and in our state system. So it's important to remember, it's always been this way. It's this way around the country. Always will be this way, that the federal government has two kinds of funding that comes in to states like North Dakota: formula funding, and then everything else, which is grants and all of that discretionary money that comes in the form of a grant to the state of North Dakota. So let me go to the next slide, and I think that's it. I think we have a little bit of time. I'm looking at the time now. We have a little bit of time for some questions, and my colleague Nicole is online, and she's going to help us with these questions. And then we'll get to thank yous at the very end. Nicole?
Yeah, thanks, Bill. That was very, very helpful. Yeah, just go ahead and enter your questions into the chat and we'll work to get to them. To start us off, Bill, can you talk to the group a little bit about what happens next with the Accelerate ND proposal?
Sure. Last week, the governor, and as I said, we had started back in June, I think it was, of this year. And again, cabinet members and cities and counties and the governor's office and legislators and partners, the contractors, consultants, businesses all over the state sort of collaborated to put together a list of the best investments that we can think of with this with these COVID dollars, these ARPA dollars. And the governor last week sort of announced this proposal. And again, you can go to the links that are provided in the chat to see more about that. But on the transportation end, of course, which was the subject of this presentation, it's all integrated into that. And we really wanted to highlight that today as a Department of Transportation. today, what's happening now is the legislature has scheduled a special session to fundamentally talk about two things. One is redistricting, and the second is the expenditures around this ARPA money and these COVID dollars. And so that's going to happen, I think, in the early part of November, according to the current information I have. And up until that time, for the next 3 weeks or so, we're going to be having lots of informational meetings, interim meetings with legislators, with legislative committees to talk about not only the proposals that have come out of the Accelerate ND work, but also proposals from around the state and from different legislators. And we look forward to supporting the legislature in helping them go through and understand in as objective way as needed the proposals and their costs and their impacts on all of that. So we look forward to all of those interim meetings. Of course, we're going to be moving forward with talking to them, extensively about the Accelerate ND proposal because of all the work that's gone into it, because of all of the analysis that's gone into it. And these, the ROI, the return on investment here is extremely strong, especially with these infrastructure projects. And of course, the legislature recognized that, and that's why they appropriated much of the transportation funding that relates to ARPA money back in the last legislative session. So we would expect the next few weeks being interim and some informational meetings, some decisions by the legislature, and then they'll go in at the beginning of November into special session and be working not only on this, but also on redistricting.
All right, that's it for questions, Bill.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
You covered everything.
Okay, that's awesome. For everyone that's out there, thank you. Thank you for all that you do to help the state of North Dakota, to help our family here at North Dakota Department of Transportation, all of our partners, our contractors, our consultants around the state, remarkable, and our legislators that represent all the various communities. They've just been a remarkable partner and resource for us. Huge thanks to the governor's office and their effort in putting together Accelerate ND. It is a remarkably comprehensive and effective proposal to invest in North Dakota. And so thank you to all of those on the call today. And Nicole, I'm looking at the clock. I think we're okay on time. And I'm going to leave the rest of the time and the rest of the day to you. And there's, again, links in the chat. And if you have any other questions, don't hesitate at all to call me, Bill Panos at the North Dakota Department of Transportation, to call any of our offices, call the governor's office. They have a bunch of folks that are ready to answer your questions about Accelerate ND. Of course, any of the other agencies as well can answer questions about Accelerate ND. We are excited about this proposal. We're excited about investing in North Dakota. Thank you and have a good day.